So this week we're going to need to do another artist study, but we're going to really start to talk about emphasis. So this is a new principle of design, and we've kind of been talking about it a little bit already when we were talking about values and how the artist uses values to make something stand out, right? We've talked about that. You know, the artist usually uses a lot of black surrounding a little bit of white to make that little bit of white stand out, or sometimes they use a lot of white and then a little bit of black so that that stands out. But we've been talking just about values. What I want to talk about are other ways to bring emphasis to an artwork. And remember, emphasis is just bringing attention to something in an area, and it's usually used by it's usually created by using contrast. So these two principles of design go hand in hand. And so far, we've only been talking about contrast of values. Remember, that's contrast just means differences. And but there's other contrasts, like other ways to create contrast, which creates emphasis. One, we started talking about color last week. So one is a temperature contrast. So an artwork can be mostly made of cool colors. And then like this example here, most of the artwork is made of cool colors, and the sun is made up of warm colors, which is bringing our attention to this in the center. And that, so by using a temperature contrast, it draws our eyes to that area because all the other colors are similar, and then that one, the opposite color stands out, right? So that's another way of creating emphasis. So here's another example. We have a temperature contrast. There's a lot of like greenish colors around, and then we have this orange and red boat in the center. So this is another example of temperature contrast. Also value contrast. It's dark on the top, really dark on the bottom, and the middle is really light. So that helps make it stand out as well. Another way of creating contrast is detail versus like no detail. So usually an area that an artist wants somebody to pay attention to, that particular thing is super detailed or really complex. And then what's surrounding it are like simple shapes, like there's all these simple big blotches of color and shapes, and then everything gets more detailed and more precise as you get to this center here. So you could be working a little bit more simplified and just focusing on detail in one area. So this is the contrast we've been talking about, is light and dark. So the castle or building back here, maybe I think it's a church. This is standing out because it's like the darkest area of the artwork. And it also has like it has the greatest contrast of dark and light, right? Because the sky is pure white and this part of the building is almost pure black. So our eye is drawn to this. Also, you can say size. This building is the largest building, and all the other buildings are really small. So the contrast in size is also bringing emphasis to this building in back. This is another example of temperature contrast. So the plant itself is all like cool colors surrounded by some warmer colors. And then there's some warm color in the center that's a little bit more vibrant, like this in the background's like a brownish gray. And the center has a little bit more of a red in the center. So that is bringing more notice to the center there. Let's see. This one has quite a few things because it has the temperature contrast. It has the value contrast happening. It also has the complex detail surrounded by like less detail around it. So this has quite a few different versions of contrast being used to help emphasize this. So you can have like multiple things. It doesn't have to be one. This is another example of large versus small. So we have this like massive building, and then like the small people in it. But what I also like about this image is that the limited color palette. Even though like the building is a stone color, that's kind of a warm gray. And then like all the people back here, the colors are a little bit cooler. The sky is cool. Some of these grays are a little bit on the cool side, but there's quite a few warm ones. And then you have these three figures that are like in this bright, bright red. And so your focus ends up on them because they stand out so much compared to all of the other colors. Like all of these other like greens and blues are a little muted. So the artist is probably mixing like complementary colors together to make the color intensity not so bright. And then that helps allow for these three figures in red to stand out. So when you're creating an artwork, you might want to play around with like just using like a very limited color palette. You know, maybe everything is in black and white and grays, and then you have one thing in color. And that really adds a lot of like, it creates a strong contrast in your artwork, and it definitely makes sure like people notice the thing that you want to notice. So this is emphasis. And the reason I'm going over this is because in today's artist study, we're adding to what we're talking about. So we've already seen this image, but you're going to put two images onto the Google slide. I want to see the color and the black and white. I want you to tell me the composition the artist used. So just like before, I want you to talk about how the artist used value, just like before. But this time I want you to talk about how did the artist create emphasis in their work? So what are some of the things that the artist used to create emphasis? And so here, for my example, just to show you, I have the composition down here. It says asymmetrical. I write that the artist uses strong value contrast, lots of dark values surrounded by light values. So like the robot is super dark, and he's surrounded by all of these lighter values that help the robot stand out. But if I'm talking about emphasis, specifically looking at the color one, the artist uses the temperature contrast to really bring emphasis to this. So like this robot is really dark, but it's surrounded by all of these oranges, and the artist wants us to really pay attention to like this electric bolt going through the robot. So this electric bolt is a bright blue, which is standing out from the orange. And that's all I'm writing. So it's like 2 sentences, right? So just like before, you'll go to your Google Cloud, you'll start a Google slide, and if your image doesn't fit, both images don't fit onto one slide, then go ahead and do 2 slides. Okay, you can put like one slide, the color slide on one and the black and white on the other.